And there's always a balance between what they want or what they're envisioning, kind of that dream.
Yeah.
And I go, okay, well, that's what we want to do. What's the reality of the situation? What's the budget? What are our time constraints? What are our logistical constraints?
Welcome to Set Life, where we tell stories from our industry. I'm Kelly Leger, and this is Amber Buteau. Hey guys, welcome to For the One Studio. We are here in Studio One with our guests today, Nathan Lindstrom and John Maxwell, not the book writer.
No, unfortunately not.
A cooler version.
But I've read
Way
many
cooler.
of his books.
Many books.
He's
Awesome.
got some good stuff.
Well,
Thanks for having us.
You bet. We're glad that you guys are here today. I can't wait to hear about your journeys and your stories and what you guys are up to. Looking forward to it. So,
First off, beautiful space.
thanks, man.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
absolutely
I
incredible.
appreciate it. Yeah, we like it a lot. We have fun. We have fun shooting here. I think most of Houston does too. So yeah.
That's the goal, right?
Well, tell us about your stories. You know, Nathan, I'll start with you. Just tell me about where you started. How did you get to where you are now, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So started as a photojournalist, interned at the Houston Chronicle when I was in college, and freelanced my last couple of years at U of H, working for the paper.
Okay. Go Cougs.
And yeah, and thought that that was the direction I wanted to take. And somewhere around 2008 or so, like, newspapers shrank substantially, and I realized there was no future in that.
Right.
So kind of did some soul searching and figured out that I still wanted to be in photography somehow. But the documentary storytelling, classic journalism aspect of it probably wasn't going to be a long-term future for me. And through happenstance, I started assisting, one or two commercial photographers here in town. They ended up connecting me with some producers and various photographers from out of town that would come in for bigger productions, and I got to learn, bigger production work, and worked my way up from, being a very tacit local assistant that barely knew how to put together a softbox or anything to being a go-to local resource for some guys off the coasts that would come in, and ended up being Digitech, and really learning my way around sets and all, and then eventually got, through all that, I was still had a website up, would somewhat shoot stuff on my own, and probably about 5 to 8 years later, or during that 5 to 8 year time span, I transitioned away, and when the shooting projects got in the way of the assisting projects and vice versa, and it became too much of an issue, I decided, okay, I've got to make a go of this. I had just gotten married, we didn't have kids. It was kind of that perfect time of life to take the risk. And like, income wise, I took like a 50% pay cut that year to do it, but it was worth it.
Yeah.
Like,
Chasing the dream.
Able to establish my own studio and do a lot of lifestyle and portrait work now for direct to corporate client and through agencies and advertising work, and
Cool.
picking up some more directing roles here and there.
Cool.
Every now and then, and
Wow.
it's a fun adventure.
Definitely. I mean, like, kind of everything, especially in our industry and whatnot, it's all about the pivot. The constant pivot, because something's changing, mass things, COVID happens, or whatever happens at the time. And AI, come on. I mean, it's always the pivot. So wild. I love it. Now, how long was that span of time? Like, what are we talking here?
I think I'm pushing 20 years off of college now.
Okay. Wow.
Not quite yet, but
Wow.
roughly speaking, I probably spent 5 years in newspapers, 5 years assisting crew side, and then 10 years now out on my own.
Wow. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, John,
Keeps building.
let's hear it, man.
So I have a very traditional producer background, in that
Okay.
I started in hospitality, managing bars and restaurants.
Okay.
for a number of years. I thought that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then I was managing a bar here in Houston. Harvey came through, and very unexpectedly, literally the day I was setting up for the day one morning, and the owners came in and said, "We're shutting it down. We're getting out of the lease, and we're shutting it down." So suddenly I was out of my role there as a general manager, and I thought, this is a sign that I'm going to get out of this industry. Like, I'm going to get out of the hospitality. I'm getting too old to work till 4 a.m. You know, it just wasn't it was fun in your 20s, but mid-30s, man, you're just, I'm over it. So I said, I'm going to find another job, anything but hospitality. And happenstance, our wives worked together, and she said, "Hey, Nathan's," I think she was maybe speaking for you a little bit, and she said, "Nathan needs some help." And Nathan could use a guy. And
Nathan wasn't ready yet. He didn't think.
Yeah. And so I said, "Yeah, I don't know much about the industry, but it seems like maybe a good pivot." And so we met. I don't think you had any intention of hiring me that day, but we talked for like 3 hours, and at the end of it, it was like, "Well, I think this is a good fit. So I don't know what I need you for exactly. I don't know what this job looks like, but I want you to come on and help manage the studio." And that has slowly progressed into producing more and managing on set more, which is very similar to hospitality, which I think is why I love it so much. It's that fire and that urgency and that the plan coming together feels a lot like a Saturday night at a restaurant. Right?
Yeah.
You put all those pieces together, don't open the doors, and then it's go time.
Yeah.
And I love that kind of controlled chaos part of production.
That's what it is.
When that gets rolling, that's my element. And I think that's the part of restaurants that I really loved, was the managing of the controlled chaos.
Totally.
So it fits. And you know, and I like to think that I free you up to do the creative and take the photos and not have to deal with invoices or whatever other menial office tasks. And then so it's been a real interesting 6 years to kind of come from that into this and really learn it from, like, I knew very little from the very beginning.
Wow.
And just throw me on set and started figuring stuff out.
Wow. And that is, man, you're describing so much of our industry right there. It's relational. It's people, it's pieces that work together. It's like an engine of a car. It's having everything work together, finding your people that you work well together with. That's everything. Nobody wants to work with people that they hate. Hope you don't hate each other. And, you know.
Not yet.
Give it some time. You know, it's all that. And then it's managing chaos, man. I mean, it's like you organize, you do your best, and then you get into you can get into making your days and having to make it work and problem solve all day.
You plan, is the saying, you plan for the best and expect the worst?
Yeah.
Or is it expect the worst and plan for the best? It's probably a little bit of both.
Probably a little bit of both.
I think you plan for the contingencies and you expect it to go well, but you know something is going to go awry. And that's kind of what I almost look forward to a little bit. Is like, how can we problem solve this? How can we work through this request or this issue that just popped up?
Yeah. It takes a special breed, I mean, to enjoy all that. I do too. I love it too. You know, in the middle of everything going on around you. And then over time, it normalizes, right?
Right.
You know, your first day on set, you're like, there's 30 people running around me, and you know, it's like learning a new language, right? You're still trying to remember what all the words are, let alone like actually use it. Now you're still remembering what all the tools are for. After time, it's second nature. You know what the silk is for. You know all your tools, and now you're just doing your job.
There's a language to the industry too.
Big time.
Says, go get the Gary Coleman, and I'm like,
the what?
The rerun?
Can you even say that? What is like
right?
And so I'm having to ask, like, what does that mean? And then when they tell me, I go, okay, what does that look like? Where is it? You just point it out to me because I have no idea. And so there's a learning curve to that, to getting on set.
It's the fake it till you make it thing. You know what I mean? That can be obviously in a weird perspective, but really there's a lot to be said for just jumping in there, getting in the fight, and just learning as you go. I mean, I remember my first day on a production set. I was out in California. I had started a production company from the ground up. I'm in Southern California, so you're up against all the big boys. You're the smallest fish, in the pond. And we just determined that we were going to work harder than anybody else. So we get up early, 6 a.m., start making phone calls to New York, calling advertising agents. You're looking for a director, you're looking for a production company. And we did that for years. Like literally, I think we were like tracking all the data, like in Excel sheets, how many calls we made, how many producers we talked to, et cetera. And I think it took us, if I remember right, the law of averages, if you're looking at marketing and stuff, there's an average. You make so many calls, you're going to get so many sales, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
Where I think our law of averages number, the magic number was like 25,000 in our industry. It took us not 25,000 calls. We made probably hundreds of thousands of calls. It took us 25,000 calls talking to the right producer looking for a director or a production company before we got our first job. And we finally got that first job, and I thought we were rich. They're like, you got $25,000 to make a commercial. I'm like, yes. And then I started trying to make a commercial for $25,000. I'm like,
that doesn't go far.
No, I think we lost money.
Right.
But it was our first one, and we wanted to do it so well that like I overcompensated everything. I'm a green director. I haven't done it. So I hire Michael Negrin, cinematographer for like the Gilmore Girls in Las Vegas. I get the best of the best to come in. I have this crew out of LA that I couldn't afford. You know, it had special effects in it. It has kids in it. It has everything that's like crazy to work with.
Yeah.
And I just jumped in the fight. And I remember about, halfway through the day of doing this, I'm so nervous, about halfway through the day that nobody knew it was my first time directing. And I was like, I fooled everybody.
Right.
It's like, you feel funny for a long time calling yourself a director. You're like, even though you really are, you just don't have the experience to go along with it. And something over that time that kind of gets developed in you, the confidence is there, and all of a sudden it all kicks in. You just kind of stay the course, with it all. So tell me about what you guys have now. Like tell me about the studio that you have for people who don't have a clue about what's going on with this symbiotic thing you guys got going on. Tell me about this.
Yeah. So we've got a studio space close to downtown Houston, inside a building called Silver Street Studios that is part of a larger arts community. It's within the First Ward Arts District in Houston. And so we're surrounded by painters and sculptors and people who are, in a lot of ways, way more creative than I am. I've learned more about color theory just hanging out with painters and watching them mix paint and, how they go about creating. And which is then translated into the way the color work I do in retouching photos and all. Yeah. But it's a nice space that, it's big enough that we can shoot a portrait or, if we need to do some random product photography, whatever, we can do some smaller stuff, but it's also not so much overhead that, we have to be beholden to it. Right. And we can go and rent out larger spaces like this, when the project requires it. Yeah. And right now it's John and myself. His job is studio manager, producer. Small business. Like we both do business development and making all those calls and just trying to stay in touch with clients and prospective clients, whoever we can. And and then when we get on set or get on a project. John shifts from running studio to running the production. Yeah. And has done a fantastic job in just learning the industry, learning, okay, well, what's, what are we going to need for this specific project? And then we can scale up, our services for, stills side, adding assistants and, grooming or whatever other crew is needed, locations, props, wardrobe, whatever, just on a contract basis. Yeah. And he manages all of that. And I get to focus in on the creative and, pay attention to, the agency or client and, just really get to dig in and not have to worry about all that ancillary stuff that allows us to operate at, the level we're at, but at the same time we can scale down. And when, John needs to be an assistant, like one of the awesome things about him is he's happy to pitch in and set up a light and haul sandbags around. Or whatever.
I'm barely a second in my skill level, but I know what things are now. So when you ask me for something, I know where it goes. And I'm getting better at it. But it's nice that we have the capability to say, oh, we can just handle this, the two of us. We don't have to go out, bring somebody else in. And I'm usually there in the very beginning of when we first meet with the client or that first phone call. So we're on the same page immediately with projects. It's not like, okay, let me get this started. I got to call on a producer and then fill them in and like bring this new person in. Like, we're already there, and from the get-go, and then maintaining those relationships. I do a lot of just kind of account management or client relationships ongoing.
Yep.
And I think that allows us to maintain some really nice relationships over the years that keep coming back, because there's someone there who can answer their questions, who can can I pull a picture from that shoot a couple years ago, or whatever I can do to kind of maintain those relationships while Nathan's doing the creative and the creating new content and new work. I can kind of be there behind the scenes maintaining.
So you feel like you got a little bit of left brain, right brain going on here?
For sure.
Creative and administrative and producing and so forth.
Yeah. I don't think I ever would have called myself a creative. I don't know if I still would. Although I do a little bit more now. He lets me kind of give my inputs here and there.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of a good part of our dynamic, is that I don't see things from a creative, and I'm not as connected or it's not as personal to me. I'm kind of outside of it, and I'm managing the logistics and I'm managing the production, and so I have a little different viewpoint on things. And so that dynamic between the two of us, either you pull me one way or I kind of pull you back, and let's reevaluate this from an outside perspective.
Yes, that's good.
Not as an artist, but just as someone here trying to make this go.
That's good.
Yeah, I think it really creates a good, valuable dynamic.
The best relationships out there, I mean, that we've seen in industries are that, whether it's director, producer duos, they balance each other out.
Exactly.
You have extreme creative, and you have somebody who gets all the practicals. You got to have it. Like, I've always had that in the industry. I mean, my head's definitely in the clouds, but that's where it's supposed to be.
Right.
I mean, you have to start there. Then you have a producer who can reel you a little bit into your actual budget. Right now it's my wife, for me. We're about to design a whole set here for a new podcast we're putting out, and I got I'm showing her all my photos. I want it to look like this, and she's like, I'm like, babe, the idea just came out of my brain. Don't be a dream killer yet. Give me a little bit of chance to run before you tell me we're gonna have to store everything and how much it's gonna cost. I'm like, just give me a second, But you have to start there. And then you can't. I've always like associated it with when I talk to a client about creative and budgets, because it's real things. You got to balance both.
Yep.
I'm looking at it like a paints in a toolkit or whatever, on a palette, and I'm like, I want to paint this picture, but you got to tell me how many paints I have to work with here.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, am I in grayscale here? Do I have a few? I can do that.
Yeah.
I just need to know what I'm dealing with, or do I have all the colors of the rainbow? Where am I?
Right.
So budgets can dictate that. But when you think about it, when you first started, you didn't have all the paints. You had to. It's the whole necessity is the mother of invention. You have what you have.
Yep.
And it's like, actually, when I look back, some of the cooler work, not that the work's not cool now, but you kind of get a little spoiled with the more paints that you get.
Well, right.
Right. And does it get easier? Yeah. But if you remember those days where you just had to pull it off, you had to figure it out. You had to, I don't have an Apple box, let's build a box. Whatever it is, you just make the thing happen. Those are some cool days,
That's a lot
cool
of
days
fun.
too. Yeah.
I mean, and we still get into that,
Totally.
a couple of years ago, I was on vacation, and I think I walked out of the door that summer and was just like, hey, John, I'm going to be gone for the next, 3 weeks or something. I was like, if you really need me, call my wife, because I'm leaving my phone.
And he did. There was I didn't see emails come through. And he needed that.
Yeah.
As an independent entrepreneur, I don't think people give enough time to do that. Just unplug and know that it's.
Honestly, it was the first time in 15, 20 years that I'd given myself permission to do it.
Wow.
And I came back, and John was like, oh yeah, by the way, we've got this shoot coming up. And, it was for a startup company that, they were going for Series B funding or something like that. Product wasn't approved for market, talking about scrappy.
Yeah.
But we believed in the product. We, believed in, John connected with the client, and you know, at first they had, you know, this idea, this dream of multi-day, multi-location shoot and stuff that was going to be big budget, and they didn't have anything to work with. And John, you know, with everything that he's learned over the last, you know, few years, approached them and said, like, well, okay, we can't do this and what you're proposing for this budget, but here's what we can do.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you take on, you know, responsibilities for locations and props and talent and, you know, all this other stuff, like, you know, basically we ran, you know, the stills and motion side of it.
Right.
And they provided everything else.
Yes.
And we made the budget work, and, you know, it's won a few awards, and, you know, they're using it all over the place. And, you know,
I love it.
Like, it's cool seeing, like, their posts from trade shows and wherever else that, you know, the work's now being printed like
Yes.
8-10 feet tall. And,
Yes.
you know, it's like,
Dude, yes.
you know, and it makes an impression. Like, you're in one of those big trade show rooms and all booze all everywhere, and it's like, here's one that has, you know, I mean, granted, I'm biased, it's my photography, but you know, it's like, it's really good use of the photography.
Yeah.
You know, which is really cool to see.
Yes. I
Um,
love it. This is like, for those of you watching, these are the kind of guys that you want on your team. When you come to somebody who is going to help you with your product, build your brand, like carry your baby, this are the kind of guys you want to do it, because they're fighting for you. They're trying to figure out how to make it work, you know, so there's the give and take. And I love that. You know what I mean? I love that you're like that. Like, we need more people who care about the thing enough to make it quality, to do what it takes to give and take and make it work.
And there's always a balance between what they want or what they're envisioning, kind of that dream.
Yeah.
And go, okay, well, that's what we want to do. What's the reality of the situation? What's the budget? What are our time constraints? What are our logistical constraints? You know, we can't shoot on the moon. So what are we going to do instead?
Right.
What can we can't do that, but we could do this.
Yep.
And will this fulfill your needs? And then trying to, with that client specifically, working with them, like, well, this is what it looks like for us to do locations. This is how much it's going to cost. You know, or you can source this yourself, and maybe here's some resources. Here's what help you with the process. I'll help you along, but you're going to take care of that.
Right.
You know, this is our talent agent that we like to use. You can consult with him. So kind of helping the client along. But, you know, in that circumstance, it was like, you got to handle this, and we'll handle our side. So really working with them to figure out what's possible. And in the end, you know, they didn't get their 3 locations with 12 talent or whatever it was originally, but the day that we got was gorgeous.
Yeah.
And those images are just blasted everywhere and super valuable. And so they got, I think, you know, the value out of the shoot enough that now they got some more funding, and now they're coming back.
Yes.
And we're going to
Love it.
add that second part on, you know, and do a little bit more
love
with
it.
them.
Yeah.
So.
Tell me about some of those stories. I mean, give me at least one good one. It's something that was, whether it was chaotic, whether it turned out amazing. Give me something there.
We had one, and it's one of my probably most favorite stories, because it had a decent budget, but John had been at the studio for a year, I think.
Which one?
And was really, you know, hadn't ever taken on like a full producer role yet.
Okay.
Like, he'd been exposed, you know, and seen some productions with, you know, big sets and locations and everything, but you know, this one, the client was pushing back on budget, and, you know, we ended up having to cut our producer, and I was like, I think John can handle this. And it was a 2-day shoot, you know, 1 day in Galveston,
Did John think he could handle
1 day
this?
in Houston.
I was willing to give it a shot. I think there was probably a disclaimer, like, yeah, if that's what you want. Like, I was gonna, you know,
Attaboy, though.
back
That's
myself
good.
out of
Well,
that.
no, and I remember being clear with the art director. You know, it was direct to client, but they had an art director or creative director rather. That, you know, it was like, he had just come from the agency world,
Right.
and he was used to having a big team, and, you know, he no longer had his support system. He fully understood what it meant to cut the producer role. And I was
Right.
like, hey, listen, I've got my studio manager here. I think he's capable, but full disclosure, he's not done anything this size.
Right.
But this is how we can make this budget work.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Compromise.
and he was game for it, and we had to have, it was product for, this wagon, for kids, like a stroller wagon conversion thing that, we had to cast basically real families with kids who were the right sizes to fit in the product.
Wow.
Yeah, my first shoot producing had 12 to 15
Yeah.
2 and 3 year olds on set.
Wow.
So
And to be clear, in our industry, they say there's like what, 3 things that are the craziest things to work with them, and one of them's kids.
Animals,
Animals,
kids,
and food.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep. And here we are, 2 days, like 6 locations.
Yeah.
Kids, backup kids, etc. And full on production, stills and motion both. And I was just like, hey, go have fun. And I mean, that entire week, we're receiving product shipped into the studio and having to organize that, and we're organizing locations and talent and wardrobe and props and everything else, and doing it all, again, all on location. Wow. And I mean, John, actually, I don't think I've ever asked, did you even sleep that week? Like,
I mean, I had to have a little bit, but
Right.
it was some long
but I mean,
days.
his hair was just going everywhere, like every time I saw him.
Yeah.
And at one point on the second day of production, like, we had a couple of little girls as our main talent, and like he had barrettes in his beard and in his hair. And it's one of my favorite BTS photos. He was just there, and like it was a sink or swim kind of deal, and he swam.
Yes.
And it was so much fun to see. Like,
Kids are a trip, man.
And we had some really good kids, really good
We did.
family. But there was a lot of, switching them out. Hey, this one's having a hard time. Either fruit snacks or we switch them.
Yeah.
Grip truck got stuck in the mud.
Ugh.
That was a fun afternoon.
that was from the location. That was from
This
the
is all
direction
from this one shoot.
Yeah. That was by the direction of the locations manager, though. Like, that
totally.
wasn't,
Yes.
crew doing something wrong or anything.
Unloading a
Like,
grip truck stuck in the mud, and while we're shooting, you got to figure this out with the tow truck. And
yeah.
So
And he, like, here we are, like, truck stuck, big old box truck. And I'm just like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's just like, I've got it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And so I went on and, focused on what I needed to focus on. And, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
that was
Fun
a
time.
fun way to kind of kick it off.
Yeah.
Right.
There's no doubt.
I think, do we have time for another?
Yeah. go
Okay,
ahead.
so I think the one that stands out to me was in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
So we had this shoot, oil and gas, and they wanted to do
November of 2020.
lifestyle shoots at actual working gas stations.
This is both video and stills again?
This was just stills
Just
this
stills,
time.
okay. Because
So-
them just doing the still, honestly, guys, I mean, the stills and shooting something live action at the same time is a task in and of itself.
Oh, yeah.
So that's already kudos, on that. So
So this was, the locations were all, there was one in Texas, but the other ones were in Oklahoma. And we had been told around Oklahoma City. And so as things started coming together, the locations, well, they were working with franchise owners. So they were kind of at the mercy, the client was at the mercy of trying to work with these owners to see who will give up their station for a day to let us use it.
right.
Well, when the locations were finalized, they were nowhere near Oklahoma City. One was one exit away from Kansas,
Oh my gosh.
and then the other two were an hour and a half west of Oklahoma City. So it's this super spread out 3-day thing.
Ugh.
We had to shoot, they wanted these gorgeous night shots of the lit up signs.
In production, the last thing you want is a massive company move.
Yeah.
Right.
Because every time you lose hours. Every
Yeah,
time you
yeah.
have to move location.
And these
Well,
were
yeah, I
3
mean, it was
hours
one
away.
location a day, so at least we had that going
There you
for
go,
us.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it was, because we had to get these night shots, and because they wanted shots, of the station, both, with customers and without customers. Like, I went into the production saying, into the bid saying the only way we're doing this is if we start at like 2 a.m. and shoot from like say 3 a.m. through 10 a.m. or whatever,
Right.
it ended up being for production day.
Right.
So that we could get the night shots, the, pretty light
Mhm.
around sunrise, and then, some daytime shots and all. So we had these crazy call times.
2 a.m.
Yeah.
November in Oklahoma. So it was cold.
Basically Kansas.
Yeah.
Yeah, the very first day that we were in Oklahoma, we were up on the border, and I think it was like right at or right after sunrise, like the coldest time of the day.
Yeah.
The Digitex computer went from like full battery to completely dead.
Yeah.
And it was just toasted.
Wow.
And fortunately my laptop was working, and we just switched over to mine and said, okay, we've got to keep this plugged in like all the time, no matter what. And mine, worked for the rest of the shoot. But I looked over, probably, half an hour after the sun was coming up, and saw, looked at the DigiCart, and there were strobe batteries and the Digi's laptop that literally just frosted over, like they were like literally frozen.
Oh my gosh.
And like, yep.
Oh
It's
my
cold.
gosh. God.
Keeping talent warm.
Yeah.
And then you're in the middle of absolutely nowhere.
Sure.
There's no production infrastructure
Support,
at all.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we're sourcing. Luckily, all these stations had kind of little half restaurants in them. So I'm like, well, our craft table is now this gas station.
There you go.
So we're going to eat here. Got real tired of that after a while. But you had everything. Hey, you need some gum? I got gum. You need some water? I got water. Just keep the tab running.
Yeah.
We needed an RV, somewhere to keep talent and hair and makeup and wardrobe. And there's no production RV rentals up there. So we went to like an Airbnb for RV website, like Rent My RV. I don't remember what it was called. I found this guy with this gorgeous RV.
Like brand
said,
new.
I'm gonna.
Best production
Yeah.
RV you've ever seen.
We want to rent this, but here's the deal. We're not going on vacation. We need it for production. Oh, and would you mind driving it to each of these locations the night before and dropping it off? So we set it up with him. It's amazing what a little budget will do,
Sure,
right?
sure.
Like if you throw some money at a problem, it'll fix itself. So I got this guy with this RV to drive it to the first location, parked it and left it. He went home. We showed up, RV's there, got in it. We used it for the day. He then showed up at night, took it, and drove it to the next location.
Wow.
This is a gorgeous RV. It was really,
Yeah.
really nice.
Wow.
So every morning we got to set at 2 a.m. There's the RV waiting for us. It was that kind of
Wow.
problem solving. I don't know,
Yeah.
because otherwise the gas stations didn't open until 7 or 8, so we would have been standing outside in the cold. So
Yeah.
just fun little tricks, and you
Totally.
walk away from that, and you're like, that worked. That was kind of fun.
Like production is like going to war. Like
Yeah.
you got to expect everything. It's just nonstop. I've been shooting out in the desert, and all our cameras overheat, and we have to go find fans, and the whole camera's surrounded by fans. I've
Yeah.
shot up in the Arctic, Canada, literally on the Arctic Circle, where cameras are freezing over. I got frostbite on this ear, and it's just crazy. Like all the stuff the problem solving you have to do to figure all this stuff
yeah.
out. So.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I would love to keep talking because we could, because I love all
There's
this.
so
This
many
is-
stories.
This is our
Yeah,
world here.
Right.
But how do people get to know or connected with these war-hardened production soldiers here? How do they get to know you? Tell them how do we connect?
NathanLindstrom.com, socials at Nathan Lindstrom. All of our info's on there, and yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, good. Yeah. If you guys need some good production, people who have clearly been through it and are on your side, you know where to find them. And otherwise, we're going to see you next time on Settle.